Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to PulseOne's Tech Talk Live. My name is Eric Angelo, and I'm a client success manager here at PulseOne. And this is part 5 of our 6-part IT security series that we created to help executives in small to mid-sized businesses navigate this ever-changing, crazy headline-grabbing landscape of cybersecurity. Now, as always, during our following our discussions, we'll have a question and answer period. So if anything strikes your fancy during our tech talk, be sure to put it down there in the chat and we'll answer as many questions as we can get to. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in Chad Wiggins. Chad is co-founder and partner here at PulseOne. And let's bring in today's guest panelists, John McLaughlin. John is the founder and CEO of GuardSight. GuardSight is a specialized cybersecurity as a service provider that supplies managed threat detection and response and tactical cybersecurity services. He's a mission owner at GuardSight with 30 plus years of experience in lots of areas of technology and information security, including, and are you ready? Network engineering, software development, systems administration, vulnerability management, intelligent management, cybersecurity operations, and incident response. And let me tell you something, this guy is good with his hands and feet. He practices jujitsu, right, John?
That is correct. Yeah.
All right, John Mack.
I don't know that I'd say I'm good, but I practice it.
Fair enough. Chad and John, the stage is yours.
Thanks, buddy.
So take it away.
Take it from here. Yeah. So don't mess with John in the cyber world or in the real world. So, John, today we're going to be talking about how to grade your company and how well you're doing with cybersecurity. So are we doing things right, and to determine the company's risk level within security. So, how do you start establishing or improving your cybersecurity posture? And then how do you test where you're at with cybersecurity?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So first, just, thanks to the PulseOne team for inviting me. These are, Chad and I are, we've developed a friendship, and these talks are great. They're a lot of fun. So thanks for inviting me back. And so just to recap the question. So the idea there is like, we want to be able to establish a baseline of where our cyber is, and then measure, put a framework in place, and then use that to measure our progress. And so it's a big oftentimes a big macro type achievement, because what is it that we're trying to do? So let's play a hypothetical for some of the folks that are on the phone. Some of them may be experienced cyber practitioners, some of them may be new CXOs, CISOs, directors of information security, that kind of stuff, where they've just landed at a new company, and the company maybe doesn't have anything, or maybe the company that they're at doesn't have a mature program, and they want to get going on that. And so the first thing I'll talk about is just kind of some objectives and key results. And so for those of you that are OKR fans, these are really good things to use. So you kind of think of the O and OKR as like macro level things that we want to achieve as an organization. So maybe that might be, achieve some compliance, standard regulation, or, implement, purchase an EDR platform, implement, 100% coverage on our EDR platform, or, implement one vulnerability management program, and then start to think about how we're going to actually, what are the key results for the things that we would want to measure. And so, and then the operational teams that actually go execute those things, the key results are kind of a measure, or the kind of the glue between both the macro level insights that we're looking for and the actual operational things, so that we can measure those. And I kind of think about new programs, or even if you've already got a program and you're trying to get it improved, as maybe like, a 30, 60, 90 and plan and then beyond, because at least at guard site, the way that we do the OKRs that type of situation is these are quarterly objectives. So I think the mistake that companies make is first they don't identify, like, the first thing we need to be able to do is contain threats. We need to be able to fight the bad guy, and because if the bad guy is successful in their endeavor and their actions on objectives, then whatever's downrange really doesn't make a difference. So we have to be able to do that. And so triage and containment is always the first thing that I like to focus on in 30 days. However, good it is, however bad it is, kind of think about it as releases. You'll get better and better and better. We talked about at the beginning, jiu-jitsu, and I know you guys are, some martial artists on the PulseOne side, that it just doesn't happen overnight. This is a journey that you're going to go on. And so let's talk about the first 30 days. So we got this 30, 60, 90-day plan, and we're trying to put in these high-level, macro level OKRs, if you will. And so, the first thing we want to be able to do is get some containment around our infrastructure. So you have to kind of inventory what you have and know what that is. Once you understand what your infrastructure is, so let's say, for example, your infrastructure is your laptops, might be a good way to think about that. And, today a lot of people work remote, so we'll use those as an example, but it could be your cloud infrastructure, which might even be better. And just the access in and out of those things. How do I contain access in and out of it? So can I contain, if a bad guy compromises my laptop, do I have the ability to contain access in and out of that laptop? It's a good question to ask. I would say it's trivial, but it's not the most difficult thing you're going to do in cyber. The second thing is to put optics on what you have. And the reason that we want to encourage people to do that is because when good guys like us show up, or good guys like PulseOne shows up, the first thing we're going to ask you is what kind of optics do you have on the cyber battlefield, if you will. We want to be able to see the enemy and their movements. And without those optics, we can't. So you have to think about optics in that first 30 days. And then you might think about a couple of tools or technologies, or we call them weapons here. And that would be, SIMs and XDR systems or EDR systems for containment. So that gets you some logging, some correlation, and some containment. So basic primary objective in the first 30 days is just get some optics on the situation and get some containment capability in that, so that if you do have to contain, you can do it. You may not know what's going on, may not understand the threat actor, may not understand their motive, but what you will be able to do is cut off their oxygen supply. And so that's the first 30 days, which is very tactical, very operational, probably not the thing you're going to see at a GRC level or something like that, but that's what you're going to do. And then if you had to have a secondary objective in there, if you were running them in parallel, I would say vulnerability assessments. So you understand where the attack vector is, the low-hanging fruit. And, a proverbial 90% of the IRs that we've been involved with in our company, and the 13-year career of our company, a lot of it was low-hanging fruit. It was just stuff wasn't patched properly. It was misconfigured. It didn't have the right, operating system version, whatever it was. They took it. It was really a 0 day or something like that. It was something that we knew about if we had just inventoried our assets and did it. And if you had to pick a framework for that, it might be like the CIS top 20 controls, CIS top 20 controls. Make sure that stuff is taken care of. So just to recap on that first 30 days is, attack containment, be able to put some optics on the prize, get some correlation going in there. And if you've got containment capability, even in the form of like EDR, you're good to go. And then the secondary objective there is to, perform a vulnerability assessment on your assets. So now we're moving into the next 60 days. We've got some basic fundamentals, some basic, boots on the ground type stuff in cyber, if you will. What are we going to do next?
John, can you define what IR is and OKR? I think you said OKR.
Yeah. So OKRs are what are called objectives and key results. You can look it up. There's a good book by a guy named Dorr called Measure Everything. And this is essentially, these guys come out of Google. So this is essentially just a framework for establishing objectives and then establishing ways to measure those objectives. And the thing about cyber is you can do that too. So an example of that might be, let's say we knew the landscape, or we had inventoried our assets and we knew what the landscape is. Maybe one of our objectives is, 100% coverage for, endpoint detection and response. That would be an example of a high level macro. And then we have operational teams that would go ahead and implement that. And then we arrive at a rally point and we say, hey, our objective was 100% coverage. What is the measurement now? And they'd say 90% coverage, whatever it is. Okay. IR is incident response. This is post-compromise. I think of the world as the cyber world as, I'll use the acronym OAR, operations, assessments, and response. So operations is you're making daily contact with the enemy. You're fighting the bad guy. They're trying to, they're trying to attack you, and your job is to contain that. So those are your operations and your cyber hygiene, the day-to-day cyber hygiene of your company. Assessments are measuring attack surfaces, knowing what you have and knowing what those vectors are. And response is incident response. So now you've been attacked successfully, and they're in your networks, they're on your assets, whatever it is. How do you contain them and get them out? So those would be the two answers for OKRs and IRs. Good?
Good. So does GuardSight come in and provide that assessment?
We do. Yeah, we do. As a matter of fact, that OAR model is essentially our model. We're like a hamburger, lemonade, and French fries company. We're very tactical. That's what we do in the cyber, in the cyber domain. There's lots of domains in cyber. Our mission at GuardSight is that OAR mission, which is we run day-to-day operations for companies. They hire us to manage and protect their assets. And we perform assessments, both vulnerability assessments, penetration assessments. There's a little bit of difference between the two. Vulnerability management, which companies don't do really well, and then post-compromise, like how do you actually respond to that? We use models for that that are industry standard models, and essentially it's contain, eradicate, and recover. So that's what we do.
So certain tools you mentioned like XDR and EDR and all that. Are there any other hardening tools that you recommend? And where would you spend your money first, and what tools?
Yeah, so the reason I mentioned EDR is because
which is endpoint protection.
Endpoint detection and response. Yeah, I would say back before we had pure EDR systems. For all the old schoolers, there was a lot of, memory extraction and other types of things that we had to do. We no longer have to do that with EDR. The great thing about EDR is it moves us to the point of attack. So if we got a threat actor on an asset, an asset would be a laptop, server, anything that EDR will run on. If they've hacked your router, it's not going to do you any good there. Or your firewall, it wouldn't do you any good there. But your, network infrastructure typically doesn't have that capability. But assets servers. Endpoints. Yeah, you got an Active Directory server. They're moving laterally through your network. Endpoints, man. You want to clip them and terminate their access. And so that's where I would say is the most valuable tool for cyber fighters today. At least in our company, I think for many of the companies that do what we do, they would agree with that. We all know the vendors that do that. I'm not going to call out the vendors, but there's lots of competitors in the EDR space that are really good. And as a matter of fact, with our services, we usually include that. That would be where I'd spend my money first. Second would be just in logging systems. If you're in the cloud, you already have that's native to cloud. If you don't, if you're an on-prem company, you need to set up some form of logging infrastructure. And again, there's lots of vendors that do this, some type of correlation on that. That way you've got optics and you've got a history of what happened in the wire. So a lot of times when you get into an IR situation, there's no data. So it's all gone. But if they'd captured it up in a reservoir, we'd be good to go.
So kind of steering back to determining your company's vulnerability, or your security score, is that come out of the assessment that you guys would do?
It does. Yeah, that's correct. So the way that we do assessments is we have a scale of 1 to 5, essentially, where 1's, informational, it's low, and 5 is critical. And so we'll go through the assets that, are meaningful, where we found, particular vulnerabilities that threat actors would exploit. And those get a higher rating. So you get an average score of what you've got in the environment, but you've also got, the min, the max, the mean, the median, all these kind of things that can help your team then prioritize what to, mitigate first, remediate first. So if I've got an information, if I've got maybe an informational vulnerability on an asset, that may be less important than a critical, not maybe, it is less important than a critical. So I could go spend my time dealing with that informational deal, but the bad guy's probably going to go target that critical one first.
Now, is this every aspect of technology? So a company can come to GuardSight and be like, hey, I want you to vulnerability test on cloud, premise, cloud apps, mobile devices, laptops, desktops, every
Yes,
aspect
sir.
of technology you guys can.
Yeah. Mobile devices are interesting. We don't get a lot of calls for that, although we have done IR on mobile devices before that were involved with the attack. They might have been the point of attack. But
Like the email vector through the mobile device.
Yeah, exactly. They may have gone in that way, and they might have been on the mobile device, and then we'll just grab the mobile device and do some forensics on that to make sure we're good to go there. But they're typically, in most cases, are going to be email systems, servers, web servers, other types of infrastructure, laptops. There's still today the number one vector is phishing. That's the way the threat actors initially entered the environment. And that brings up another point too. If you're thinking about the next 30 days, next 60, 90 days, those are the kind of things you want to put in your company would be those more mature things like getting your users some phishing awareness training, getting in phishing controls, those kind of things that prioritize, where the threat actors are going to go. So the first thing is really, you have to equip the operational teams to be able to do their jobs so that if we do get a successful compromise, these op teams can quickly come in and contain and eradicate. We have a term in cyber called dwell time. And dwell time is the time that the threat actor actually lands successfully and the time that you fully contain and eradicate. And so if you're thinking about an objective during a fight or during your overall journey, it's like anytime I have a successful attack, what I want to do is reduce their dwell time. And by reducing their dwell time, I cut their oxygen supply off and I terminate their, what we call their actions on objectives.
So how long they're in their environment.
Correct.
In your environment, we've heard statistics that like the average, and you probably know these more than I do, but the average bad guys in your environment from 6 months to 18 months. And by the time they're in that, they're everywhere. And then we're hearing statistics from our cybersecurity insurance partners that are saying, over 30% of small businesses are going out of business after a cyber attack happens.
Those are both correct statistics. SMBs are typically that, they'll go out of business, but here's the deal you need to understand about that too. Threat actors understand the economies of their business. And so their objective isn't to put you out of business because they can't get any money from you if you're out of business. And so their idea is to kind of keep you alive, and they know where you're at. They know the size of your company, how many people you have in your company, potentially how much revenue you're making, because maybe they've compromised all that data. And so they're really good at this. And they also know the insurance payouts, what insurance companies are willing to pay out. And so these are the kind of things that they'll negotiate with you, these thresholds, knowing that they're most likely going to get paid. There's honor amongst thieves, if you would, is that they'll generally deliver on their promises, although they're doing nefarious things with the data behind the scenes, even after they deliver on their promises, but they understand the economies of it. And SMBs are definitely impacted because they typically don't have the expertise that's required. And you're dealing with a really sophisticated actor. If we were to go back to the martial arts thing, it'd be like a black belt fighting a white belt. And it's kind of
like no contest.
There's no contest there. Yeah. The black belt may keep you alive a little bit because he wants to fight, but that's
That's true. So how do you know that you're doing okay with a company? Is there, or with your security solutions?
Yeah.
Is it only because it's only to do a vulnerability test and a security assessment?
So I would say that's the beginning of the journey. That is a continuous operation. Those are two continuous operations, in there. So just in general, security hygiene, if you will, watching the wire, and vulnerability management are two things that you absolutely have to do. If you didn't do anything else, you'd want to do those.
Well, I know like some industries, you started it out talking about different industries that have compliance, right? Yeah. And so, I know our clients that are HIPAA compliant or SOC 2 compliant, they have to do penetration, at least, their annual penetration testing, right? And so kind of lends to it. what you're talking about, it's always evolving, and
It's
you
always
need,
evolving. If you were to get out to that 91, 90 days past, you'd probably want to be into like some type of a framework, like, CSF, a cybersecurity framework from NIST, or, we're a SOC 2 type 2 company, 27001, any of these frameworks that are useful, you'll start to implement those. You're more sophisticated, you're mature, you've got the ability to do that. Probably, phishing simulations will start to come into play. Tabletop exercises. We do a lot of tabletop exercises with companies to prepare them. And recently we've added, live fire cyber ranges to that. So if they're a bigger company, they might have technical teams come to it, that kind of deal. So those maturation things, I kind of think about, like, you can't do it all at once. And so you have to pick, like, what's the most important thing. And for me, like, if the most important thing, if you could draw parallels to the natural world, is, well, I have to stay alive, right? So if I don't survive, then phishing simulations aren't going to make a bit of difference. And some, double secret probation, extra special tool that this vendor says, hey man, put this in and all your problems will go away. That doesn't work that way. You guys know that. And it just doesn't work. As a matter of fact, what you really end up with is more technical debt. And if you're a small company, you probably don't have any type of really good succession management in place for when that one guy that knows how that weapon works leaves. Right. So,
right.
Which is why they, go with companies like ours, because we manage all that kind of stuff for them and make those problems go away.
So the question of, like, how do you know if you're doing cybersecurity well? Is there a way? And what I'm thinking right now is, if you don't know cybersecurity, if you're not a subject matter expertise in this world, is there a way to know that you're doing it well?
Yeah, you hire an SME. I mean, it would be, I think if you draw it like maybe the legal profession, like, if, you don't show up to court without a lawyer because, well, you're not a lawyer. And even if you were, you still wouldn't show up to court without a lawyer. You get an SME or a company that provides those expert services. Many SMBs, also have, outside accounting firms, CPA and tax firms, and they have outside legal firms and the rest of that. They may have in-house people that are, are shepherding that situation, those outside.
They're savvy with IT.
Yeah. They might be savvy. They're kind of like they're in-house, they're the shepherds that are running and coordinating that type of deal. But, through our growth, we've always had external law firms and external tax firms and external CPA firms and, a lot of those things. And it's the same thing in cyber, where, you really want to engage with an external firm that has that level of expertise. And actually the best solutions are the ones where, there are hybrid solutions. So for example, we have, lots of customers that are, in the hundreds of millions of dollars, not just 10 million or 50 million, but maybe, 250 million. And they'll have a staff of 1 or 2 people on their team that are security people. They might also do some IT work, but we have a hybrid model there where we kind of approach that together, probably much like you guys do, similar to that. Yeah. Those hybrid models work out. They work excellent. And for leadership in companies, that gives them that feeling like, hey, I like to think about it like, people, it turns out like people sleep, and like, they also like, they have children and they go on vacation and they have, medical issues, right? And all these things. And so if you're highly dependent on that one person or those 2 people to protect your assets, well, the reality of it is, at some point in time, there's going to be a void there, and you have to learn how to deal with that. And that's why, using external SMEs are another good reason to do that.
Is there a matrix that you guys have where, out of 200 employees, 200 computer users, you should have, 1 security guy plus guard site? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a matrix on it, but I could tell you, like, qualitatively, a good way to think about that is, like, when are the bad guys going to attack me? And the answer is, well, you don't know. And they're operating 7/24. So you have to operate 7/24. And so the answer to that question is, it probably just depends on your size and your maturity. Most of the companies in the SMB space that we deal with have 2 to 3, key players on their teams. And what they've learned to do is to almost dispatch that day-to-day hygiene work to companies like ours so that they don't have to deal with that. They might be more at the actual, when we talked about those OKRs, it might be more at the macro level, planning things and then making sure those things get executed by their operational team. So maybe 2 to 3 people. What I would say about that, though, is you need them. And here's the reason that you need them. Security teams generally do not own the assets. Like at GuardSight, we don't own any of the assets in our customers. So let's say we get into a cyber fight and part of our containment strategy is we're going to issue a course of action that says we want you to block something at the firewall, right? I'm just going to use a simple trivial example. Well, we don't own those firewalls. We don't control those firewalls. We don't have authorization to do those. So we need to dispatch somebody within that company to get that done. And that somebody would be those 2 or 3 people I was talking about.
Or that's where a good partnership like PulseOne and GuardSight
Exactly.
come in.
Yeah,
right?
we do that a lot. So with our PulseOne partners, we will dispatch, like, first of all, in a TTX, they're part of the tabletop exercise. And we say, hey, when we get into a fight, here's our role, here's your role. We're going to give your team courses of action. They're roger that. They're good to go. We give them a course of action to block a firewall. They get it done. Boom. Right. That is awesome. And the company will have people involved with that too, but that's kind of what you want. Highly skilled operators that this is what we do.
Right. So you're monitoring and sending the alerts, and then you need an MSP like PulseOne or in-house IT person.
Every minute of the day, it happens
right.
at GuardSight. Yeah, every minute of the day. We're processing, trillions of events a year. And so, yeah, we can't do that without teams, without teams like PulseOne. That is 100% correct.
Yeah. So is there like 3 security solutions, 4 or 5 security solutions that you could leave their viewers today? Like, you need to have endpoint protection, password manager. What are the top?
Yeah, those are 2 good ones for sure. I would say there's difference between just like general information security and then, of course, just security operations. So I'm going to give it from the security operations side heavy first, and then I'll check back. So password managers would be like an information security tool for me. It would be an example of that. Mm-hmm. And that's going to provide really good hygiene. But from an operational perspective, we talked about some of them: EDR, endpoint detection and response. And you can either, go out and, put some CapEx on that, or, most MDR companies today like ours will bring that with us. You kind of think like, if you don't have the weapon, we probably do, we'll bring it with us. It'd just be a line, it wouldn't be a line item. You have a monthly, bill essentially. EDR, SIMs, any type of SIM, security information, event management, correlation tools. Today, there's, a lot of talk about XDR, which is essentially SIMs for old schoolers, but, any type of vulnerability scanners or vulnerability management is also money. Those are the 3 things I talked about in the beginning. And again, if you didn't have those, you don't know what those are, you use a company like ours or a company like PulseOne, and they'll supply that. Sometimes when we go in, the customers already have the weaponry, they already have the tools, so we'll operate it. If they don't, then we'll supply it.
Got it. One big one that I interviewed KnowBe4. Roger.
Those guys are great. They're solid.
Yeah. And they're saying statistics like 30 to 40% of breaches happen through employees, and by training your employees and having the simulation attacks like you were talking about earlier. That's what made me think of it. That is becoming more and more of a high recommendation to all of our clients.
I put KnowBe4 in that journey I was talking about. Like, if you think about first, 30, 60, 90, they're somewhere in between the 60 and the 90. Yeah, we put them in. Yeah, they are outstanding tool.
Well, any last thoughts that we didn't cover?
I can't think of any. I'd say, if I could make one recommendation, is like get prepared. Like you're gonna get attacked successfully at some point, and you just need to be prepared for how to deal with it. And the one thing that's really useful is if you just have you can pick up the phone and you've got a company on, sitting at your side. You just pick them up and say, hey, they probably would tell you anyway, look, you've got a problem. But that would be my recommendation. Get some companies by your side. This is serious business. These people are in it to win it. And if you're not, they're going to smoke you. I mean, it's that easy.
Well, and you want to have a company before it happens, not after. You don't want to be looking for a company after it happens.
So I know we're running out of time, but I want to make a point. I want to just buttress that point real quick. Here's what happens in incident response. When you go to engage an incident response firm, if you've engaged them directly, or you engage a company like that, the first thing you need to do is you need to get those legal contracts out of the way. and legal contracts go to lawyers, and lawyers take time. So you're better off making sure that paper's in place, to your point, like they're at the ready to go. That's really important.
Good point. Very good point. Welcome back, Eric.
Hey, good to be back. Thank you, gentlemen. Awesome chat. As always, we did get a couple questions and we still have a little time. So anyone who's playing along at home, if you got a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. Couple definitions here. You mentioned technical debt and tabletop exercises. Can you define those, please?
Sure. So technical debt is assets in your environment, your network, your ecosystem, essentially, that have degraded, and they're creating technical liability for you. They're giving essentially the threat actor an opportunity to compromise those assets. We all have them. Could be, for a simple example, might be a printer in your environment that's just, it's never been patched, it's outdated. The bad guys will use these as pivot points to exfil data from your networks. So that's an example of technical debt. It's like maybe one way to think about it in the natural world is that thing that's been laying in your garage for 100 years and you just keep walking by it or tripping over it, at night, something like that. And you don't move it, like get rid of it. That's like the way to do it. I mean, it's that simple. Like if you ignore it, ignorance is not bliss in this situation. So that's technical debt. Tabletop exercises are a way for companies to prepare to fight and to provide simulations of what that cyber fight will look like, and the roles and the responsibilities and what unified command looks like in that situation. So, bang, right? And so what you want to do is you want to move left of bang, if you will, because once bang hits, it's smoky, people are confused, people's heart rates are up, we don't know who to call, what's happening, that fog, if you will. What you want to be able to do is kind of reduce that fog, get some clarity on the situation. If you prepared for that as a team and you know what's going to happen and you know the lexicon and the taxonomy that you're going to share, if you've got good command, you're going to win that fight. That's just the bottom line. If you're not, you're going to lose the fight.
Yeah. So it's like a rehearsal.
It's a rehearsal. It's just a simulation. And we have multiple simulations types. Some of them are just basic, like we talked about, like PulseOne gets invited to the TTX and they're your IT, organization that's going to provide some containment capability. We're going to run unified command. When we open up a command center, this is what that's going to look like. It's going to include an after action report that we're writing as we go. You're going to get situation reports during the fight, all these kind of things. Like companies don't think about this. They just get hacked and then they're just, bad guy on-prem. What do I do? It's like, get prepared.
Right. Here's one from a person who Googled you while we were during the discussion. You mentioned fatigue management on your website. Could you explain a little more about what that is?
Yeah, this is great. So I've been running IRs for a long time and had some great mentors in IRs too that helped me. One of the things that you'll recognize in an IR quickly is what we'll call fatigue management. And IRs, again, are incident response. Even actually in the SecOps environment, if you think about that day-to-day persistence dealing with the enemy, like that can be fatiguing. You get desensitized. And so in an IR fight, especially, what happens is, like, one of the things you'll do in a TTX is talk about, okay, how are we going to have fatigue management? They can't work 24 hours a day. And by the way, maybe that individual on your team is going to a wedding that weekend. And if he does not go to that wedding, it might be his, by the way, but his spouse is not going to be too happy with him, or her spouse is not going to be too happy with him, whatever it is, whatever the case is. The point is like people get tired. And when people get tired, they make bad decisions. They start, their brains shut down. They're not functioning properly. So what you want to do is you want to understand that's a reality. And what you want to do is manage that reality. So how do we have various shifts? And then during the fight, and if we did have shifts during the fight, how do we transfer our communications from shift to shift? And these are kind of what situation reports will do for you. So if I'm coming in at 06 in the morning, and the other guys were coming out, and there's an overlap there, they can brief me on the day's events, the courses of action, and what my responsibility can do. That relieves them to go take a snooze or whatever they're going to do to kind of deal with that. Most people don't think about that. the people that think about that are the people that have been in, thousands of fights that know this is what you need to do to stay alive and keep people fresh.
All right. Again, well put. I think that's about it. Any closing thoughts?
Nope, that's it. I really appreciate your team inviting us, and I appreciate the questions from the audience. And thanks a lot. Look forward to the next one.
All right. Thank you,
Well,
John.
Final thoughts would be, for me, get a vulnerability test going as soon as possible. If you don't know where you're at, your security response is at. If you don't have an IR, if you've never done a tabletop exercise, it's time to engage and get that going. Because one thing that we know, what John, you said, it's not if you're going to get breached, it's just when, right?
That is correct.
Right.
So,
right. Words to live by. Words to live by. Thanks, Chad. As always, our chats are going to continue next week when we talk with Josh Goldberg, the USI Partner VP, and we're going to learn the ins and outs of comprehensive cybersecurity insurance. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Chad or myself, and you can also check us out at the website. And that's it. Until next week, same bad time, same bad channel. Have a good week, and thank you all.
thanks, John.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to you
Appreciate
soon.
it. Yep.
Okay, bye.